Welcome back, students. Today we are again here to discuss the next topic from chapter 10, Displacing Indigenous People. And today the topic we are going to discuss is Australia. As you have remembered that the earlier topic that we have discussed was about North America. We have discussed in the previous tutorials that how the Europeans came to North America, they got settled down over there, as well as how did they force the native people to move from their own lands. Like the same, here is another case study of Australia to discuss a little more expansionist policy of the Europeans. As you can see in the map, that how these European countries at once they dominated North America and later on they reached Australia. So, to begin with the topic that belongs basically to Australia and the Australian people, we should discuss at first that what are the topics that are going to be dealt by us is introduction and the winds of change. These are the two topics related to Australia to be discussed by us. Yes, so first of all, now as you can see, there is the map of Australia. There is a word written Aborigines. Aborigines basically means for a general name given to a number of different societies, and basically those societies which belong to a particular area or a particular piece of land. So, if we talk about the native people or the aborigine people of Australia, we have to say that they came to Australia near about 40,000 years back. They came from New Guinea, which was connected to Australia by a land bridge. In the native tradition, they did not come to Australia but had always been there. That means they don't accept that they anyhow at any time they came from anywhere. They just believe that they are always been there. The past centuries were called the dream time. In the 18th century, there were between 350 and 750 native communities in Australia, each with its own language. Even in today's times, more than 200 languages are spoken in Australia. There is another large group of indigenous people living in the north who are known as Torres Straits Islanders. So these are basically the original people belonging to Australia. If we talk about the population of Australia, Australia is sparsely populated area. Most of the towns are along the coastal areas where the British first arrived in 1770 because the central region is totally arid. There was a reversal of feeling among British when the Captain Cook killed in Hawaii. That means there happened a situation when an English sailor, Captain Cook, who reached Australia, he was killed by the native of Australia in Hawaii Island, due to which the situation and the relationship between the Australians and the Europeans started to become bitter. 90% of native died due to germs, loss of lands, and battle against settlers. After that, the early settlers were convict in Australia from England. those settlers who came from Europe to get settled down in Australia, they were basically the prisoners who were kept in jail in Europe. Those prisoners, those criminals, we can say, that the criminal minded people were getting settled down with the help of the English government. But later on, due to the initiatives of European government in Australia, many economic developments was also there, like vast sheep farms, mining stations, vineyards, wheat farms. They all developed. Issue of slavery, later Chinese immigrants provided cheap labor, but it created fear among Australians that if the Chinese are being enslaved by the Europeans, once even the Australians can also be enslaved by them. This was a fear among the mind of the Australian native people. Now, if we talk about what changes came in the lives of Australian people, you can see that there was a lecture by W.E.H. Tanner in the year 1968. And the topic of the lecture was the Great Australian Silence. This lecture led a very far reaching impact on the minds of the native Australians about their rights, about their basic needs, as well as the consciousness, the awareness about them. Steps were also taken to record communities with distinct cultures, unique ways of understanding nature, climate, stories, textile and painting, and carving skills. The urgent question, which Henry Reynolds later articulated in a powerful book, Why Weren't We Told? After that, university departments, galleries of native art, museums, imaginatively designed room, native also started writing about their own lives, about their own histories. From 1970, multiculturalism has been official policy in Australia. That means in Australia now the people of different culture were having permission to adopt and to follow the culture by their own choice. The term human rights realized them Australia had no treaties with the natives formalizing the takeover land by Europeans. And due to the Human Rights Commission that came into force from the 1970s, now the human rights, the basic rights of the Australian people started to be preserved. Issue of mixed blood children, due to these two steps were taken to recognize that natives had close contact with land, so it must be respected. Need to end the injustice done with the children in an attempt to keep white and cultured people apart. That means if a mixed blood child is belonging to either at one side from the Australian belonging, in that case, that particular child is able to have the share of property and is able to own the land in Australia. So, by this, we can say that the changes started to come in the lives of the native Australians and they also started enjoying some rights, some human rights. So, that's all for the chapter. Thank you very much for listening me very carefully. We'll meet very soon with the next chapter, next tutorial. Thank you.